My name is Samantha Evans, though nobody has called me anything but Sam since basic training. I was 33 years old. The winter, my father looked across his dining room table and told me to get out of his house. I had flown back home with a wooden cane, a right leg that stopped abruptly below the knee, and a military duffel that still carried the heavy scent of the barracks. For 10 long years, I had faithfully wired every single paycheck from my deployments back home, believing it was saving my grandfather's failing orchard. Instead, my father called me a burden, and I simply walked out into the freezing night. The physical injury was not the blow that shattered my world. It was the sudden revelation waiting for me 3 days later, at the end of a long bus ride into the Oregon hills. When my grandfather Silas opened his door and saw my face standing in the cold, his eyes filled with pure confusion. I told him I had come to help save the orchard with the money I'd been sending. But the old man went entirely pale. He looked at me and stated with absolute certainty that he had never received a single dime from my deployment earnings. Somewhere along the line, 10 years of my hard work, nearly $200,000, had been intercepted by my father. Raymond had built an elaborate lie, telling Silas that I had gone completely no contact and hated the family, while returning all my unopened deployment letters marked as refused. My father had laundered the credit for my hard work to fund my sister's lavish wedding, a down payment on her home, and the sudden liquidation of his own mortgage. But my grandfather had quietly seen through Raymond's greed years ago. Silas revealed that he had placed the entire 40-acre orchard into an irrevocable trust, naming me as co-trustee. The strict legal language dictated that the property could never be sold or developed without my explicit signature. Now, my father was drowning in bad real estate debts, and a corporate developer was offering a fortune for our land. Raymond needed me completely out of the picture to break the trust, which is why he had thrown me out and started telling the town I was a mentally unstable predator exploiting an old man. Instead of screaming or fighting back, I chose absolute military focus. I moved into the spare room, and alongside my younger brother, Leo, who finally found the courage to escape our father's shadow, we built a thriving new honey business called Ruth's Field Apiary. To secure our future, I worked with a veterans legal aid attorney and had Silas extensively evaluated by specialists to prove his absolute cognitive clarity. I built an airtight wall of plain, boring, verifiable documentation around my grandfather and our land. My father's entire strategy relied on keeping the story murky and making me look reactive. But I spent those months making the truth crystal clear. Our grand reckoning came on a beautiful Saturday in October, during our first major public harvest celebration. The yard was packed with neighbors, local veterans, and corporate buyers when my father's car came speeding up the gravel driveway. Desperate and furious, Raymond marched into the center of the crowd and began loudly performing for the room, shouting that I was an unstable manipulator who had isolated a senile old man to steal his estate. I stood perfectly still, letting the old steadiness come down over me, and simply waited for him to run out of air. When he finally stopped, expecting me to scream back so he could play the victim, I gave him something much worse. I gave him the paperwork. I calmly laid the legal folder flat on the contract table for the entire neighborhood to see. In a level voice, I narrated the documents, displaying the irrevocable trust, the doctor's evaluations of Silas, and the stack of my own returned unopened deployment letters. I revealed the exact math of the stolen funds that had financed his comfortable life, turning to him directly to say that while he called me a burden, I was the one who had been carrying all of them. Silas stood up from his chair, confirming to the entire yard that every single word was true. Raymond's face cycled through pure fury and humiliation as he realized he had no exit left. I gently set a golden jar of our honey on his car window, told him it was the only thing he would ever get from this land, and watched him drive away forever. Our contract went through that afternoon, and Ruth's field honey was on major store shelves by Thanksgiving. My father's threatened lawsuit never came because there is no case to be made when every fact is already standing in daylight. My mother eventually sent a long letter trying to minimize the past, but I quietly placed it in a desk drawer and chose to leave it completely unanswered, realizing you can love your relatives while still declining to pay an emotional price for the privilege. Blood made the Evans family my relatives, but a stubborn old beekeeper and a brother who stopped being afraid are what made me a family. I had lost my savings and a limb, but at the end of that cold bus ride, I finally found a home built on truth. Please like and subscribe my channel if you loved your military.